So last week, it was about last week. Actually, on Wednesday, the last Wednesday of July, a movie came out that really, it really wasn't promoted too much. I mean, I heard about it, that it was coming. It had a little teaser trailer and all that, but nothing more was said about it. But just based on that first teaser, that was shown, a lot of us kind of had an idea of, we kind of had an idea that this was going to go in the direction we felt it was going to go in. And sure enough, from what everybody has said about this movie, through their, from the special screenings of it, to the, to them doing spoiler reviews and all that, pretty much what everybody felt was going to be the end result was the end result. And of course I'm talking about the movie Together, which is a new movie that's come out. It stars the real-life couple together, David Franco and Alison Brie, I think. And again, the teaser kind of gave you an idea, and you just based on that teaser, you're like, you're wondering, are they going to do what we think they're going to do? And lo and behold, they do. And basically, it's gotten a lot of people talking because of that premise. But why does it got people talking? Why are people taken aback by it? Why is it so fascinating to people, to talk about whether or not they liked the movie, or whether or not they felt the movie was, kind of, sending a message, but in a very weird way. It's like, what's the deal with the interest in this movie? And I think it has to do with the fact that I said this a long time ago on camera as well as in the audio video. We are now in an era, ERA, if you will, era. We are now in an era to where a lot of the movie creators, a lot of the screenwriters, a lot of the directors, the producers and all that, they come from my generation. They come from my generation, Generation X. They come from the Generation Y, that came afterwards. We are in this time frame where the Generation X's and Y's are basically behind the scenes. We're the ones writing the scripts. We're the ones producing. We're the ones filming. We're the ones directing. We're the ones behind these practical and CGI effects. We're the ones basically going to the studios and pitching our ideas. And by pitching our ideas and hopefully getting them approved, we're getting our ideas that we've always wanted to see become reality. And that's exactly what's been going on. I mean, last year, it was The Substance. And then over the past few years prior, there have been other movies very similar, to The Substance and to what we have here Together. But again, it's all about wanting to see your ideas come to life. And whoever decided to come up with the premise for Together basically acknowledged that this might acknowledge to themselves and to those they were working with that this might be the only shot to get something like this up and running. And they did. And like I said, it's got a lot of people talking because the end result is you have the two main characters, the real life couple, literally just to save Alison Brie's character's life, you have them literally fuse, merge, meld into each other and become one person. They become one person, literally. And it's basically, obviously, a female version or a female futa version, as they call it, which is another word entirely. But everybody has dubbed this character Tilly. We don't have a name officially, but they're dubbing her Tilly because they're taking the Tim name, I think it's the David Franco's character Tim, his name, and Alison Brie's character's Millie's name, and combining it. But again, I think it's that fascination. It's that fascination that this kind of movie, this kind of story got the opportunity to see the light of day. But again, like I said, we are in this time frame, this era, to where a lot of this stuff is going to be, coming out throughout the next several years. Like I said, it's been coming out even before, even on a big scale. It's been coming out. I mean, Lucy with Scarlett Johansson. That premise of that movie, that premise of that film. You would never think you'd see something like that with Scarlett Johansson or any big name actress or actor, but yet here you were. Another independent film was a very well-known actress who just did a film earlier this year, last year, with Tom Hanks. Robin Wright. She did The Congress. Very underrated film. A great blend of live action and animation. But you never thought you'd see something like that with her. And the animation part really takes you to that trippiness that you would not expect. The thing is, no matter what you think wouldn't be possible, as a film or as a show, is possible. It is. I mean, I think, what was it? Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had an episode that basically spun off into a series of mini plots or a subplot where one of the main characters got absorbed into a piece of alien rock and then sent to another world. And she was placed into a war, and she was placed into this war years in the future or something like that. I don't know. But did she come back? Yeah, she did. But she was absorbed, and she was stuck in there until she could find a way out. You would never expect that in a show like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but because it's based on the Marvel property called Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that's an exception. But even still, you wouldn't expect, like I said, something like that in a live action show. I mean, this is why sometimes now you're hearing, people deciding, hey, we want to take some of our properties that have been mostly known for live action and we want to put them into animation, just like back in the 70s and early 80s when they would do that, because they see that animation is a lot more freelance. In other words, you could do a lot more with animation than you could with live action. But with today's technology, you could do what you do in animation, or what you could look at as being more possible in animation. You can do that now in live action with today's technology. But again, this is why people literally, they're just in wonderment. They're just in wonderment at what they're seeing, with a lot of these films. Like I said, you look at Lucy, you look at Together, you look at, The Substance. Heck, I'm looking at a film right now that I have called Annihilation with Natalie Portman. You look at the premise there with that movie, would you ever expect Natalie Portman to be in a film like that? Would you ever expect that? No. What about, the Snow White and the Huntsman, in the Huntsman's War movies? Did you ever expect, characters like Chris Hemsworth? I think, who is it? Chris Hemsworth and, Charlize Theron, Kristen Stewart and everything, but mostly Charlize Theron and, Chris Hemsworth. Would you ever expect them in a movie like that? Would you ever expect them in a movie like that? No, you wouldn't. Especially with what happens with Charlize Theron's character at the end. No, you wouldn't expect that. You wouldn't expect them to be in a movie like that, but yet here they are. You take a look at Alita Battle Angel, based on the manga and anime. Did you ever think you'd see, the actors and all that being that? No. It's one of those movies that you wouldn't think they would be involved in because it's so trippy. Not just because it's based on a manga and an anime, but because it's so trippy and everything. Especially with what happens to the characters. Again, you wouldn't expect them to do that. You wouldn't. I mean, another film as well, and I have it right here in front of me, if I can just get it. Salt with Angelina Jolie. You wouldn't expect Salt to be a movie she'd be part of, but yet here she is. She's part of it. There's Ultraviolet as well. You wouldn't expect that kind of movie to be in existence, but yet there it is. Same with Aeon Flux, based on the MTV cartoon, the late night cartoon they did. You wouldn't expect that, and I don't know who was in that one, who played Eon, but you wouldn't expect them to be part of that, but yet again, yet again, here we are. Point I'm getting at, folks, is we are not, as I said earlier, we are in a time frame. We are in an era right now to where the Generation Xers like me, the Generation Yers, like those that came before, or came after, I should say, the Generation X's and Yers and all that, we are the ones, our generation are the ones that are taking the mantle. We're taking the mantle and we're running with it. We're taking the ball and we're running with it. We're scoring with it. We're hitting grand slams with it or hitting singles and home runs as best we could. We're doing that because we're looking at it as this might be our only opportunity. This might be our only opportunity to see some of our stories become reality. And that's why you're seeing stuff like Together. That's why you're seeing things like last year with The Substance. That's why you're seeing things in previous years, like The Congress, like Lucy, like Annihilation, like Salt and Ultraviolet and Eon Flux, and even Ghost in the Shell, the live action edition. You're seeing all this, happening because we're in that time frame now to where this kind of stuff in the past probably wouldn't be possible. Adaptation or original ideas or not. But now it is. We're in that time frame. The Gen Xers, the Gen Yers, we're the ones coming out and saying, let's make this happen. And hey, if it's our only shot, so be it. And that's what you're getting. That's what you're getting here with a lot of these films. You're getting basically an opportunity for stories that normally wouldn't probably be told or get a chance to be told. You're seeing them actually come to fruition. You're seeing them become reality. And and this is again why I believe a lot of folks are very talkative. They're very talkative about, the whole situation. They're like, when they look at a movie like Together, it blows their minds that something like that got approved, especially with its ending. They look at something like Lucy and a surprise that got approved, especially with the way that ends, and that's leading to a potential sequel and stuff. They take a look at, like I say, Annihilation. They take a look at, Ultraviolet. They take a look at Salt, Eon Flux. They look at these films and they're like, how in the world do these get made and everything? They look at Valera's. They look at the movie, the Valera City movie with Rihanna in it as that shape-shifting monster, gooey shape-shifting monster protagonist, whatever, singer. They look at that and they wonder, how did that get approved? Again, it's all about being in a time frame and era that you would not expect, that if someone would have told you 30, 40 years ago that these kind of films and all that would be more the norm now, they'd be given more of a chance than they usually were in the past, no one would have believed you. No one would have believed you. No one would have believed that any of these films in the past 5, 10 years would have been given a chance to, see the light of day. Nobody would have believed you. And that's a fact. That's a fact. Even on the anime side of things, no one would have believed them in the past 25 years. Nobody would have believed them. Nobody would have believed them about, hey, let's do a movie based on a doctor that has a virtual alter ego called Paprika who can become anything she wants. No one would have believed that person. No one would believe that person in that, making that happen or seeing that happen. No one would have seen. No one would have, basically bat an eye on it, because to them they'd be like, yeah, that's not going to happen. No one's going to watch that movie. No way that movie is going to make money. And yet, guess what? It made money. It made money. Point is, like I said, different time, different era, and all that. Things are a lot more. Things are a lot more acceptable than they were in the past. They are. things a lot more, acceptable than, what they were previously. I mean, yeah, could you get your, I'm just checking some here. Could you get, your kind of movies that were way out there, that were WTFs and everything? Absolutely. There's no doubt. You could, and there's various examples, believe me. There's various examples, believe me. But, essentially when you think about it, they weren't as common. They were like far and few and in between. Nowadays, you can't go 1 year without seeing 1, 2, maybe 3 of these kind of movies, like Together, like Substance, and many others coming out. You can't go a year, if not 6 months, without hearing about a movie like that being released or coming to theaters or being developed. You can't. It's just one of those situations to where it's like, it's just one of those situations to where it's like, you just got to see what they're going to come up with, and whether or not it'll be, a hit or it won't be. It's just, like I said, it's just one of those, and that was my phone going off there. It's just one of those moments. It's just one of those moments in time to where you just have to say to yourself, I never thought it would. If you just have to say to yourself, I never thought it would happen, but yet it is. Or you have to ask yourself, that it's just one of those moments in time to where you have to ask yourself, man, if somebody would have or say to yourself and ask yourself, basically that, man, if somebody would have said this was going to happen, 30 years ago, if somebody was going to tell me 30, 40 years ago this was going to happen, I wouldn't have believed them. But yet, here we are. We are in a time and place where these kind of films, these kind of movies, and even shows are becoming more of the norm. I mean, even from an animation perspective, becoming more of a norm. There's a show on Amazon Prime, the second best hospital in the galaxy. Second season is as trippy as what sometimes. There's some episodes, I skimmed through them a bit. Some of them are like, wow, I never thought I'd see a cartoon, adult animation or not, that would do that, in this time frame. I never thought I'd see it. But yet, here you are. And yet, here you are. So, again, when I see people's reaction to the Together film and everything, when I see the reaction to it, it's mostly with the ending. Again, I know I'm being repetitive, but it's just the time and place that we're in now. It's the era in time and place we're in now, to where this kind of stuff is going to be acceptable, to where this kind of stuff is going to get seen. And whether or not it's a hit with folks or not, that's going to be up to them. That's going to be up to the box office. But at the end of the day, it's just something we got to look forward to. It's just something we got to look forward to in the future, because there's going to be more coming, in this kind of genre, in this kind of category. I mean, heck, when I look at DeviantArt and I see people like Desi Arts Michelle, in her Metamorphosis Malleability series, or her annual May Melting Me series, when I see stuff like that, to me, my thought is, if they ever had the opportunity to bring that to the big screen, they would. And it would be the kind of stuff that would be in this kind of genre, like Together and The Substance and everything, but be on a more lighthearted comedic route, or dramedy route, if you will, just based on who the characters are and the premise. I take a look at someone like Trouble TRO, and I see what they're doing with Pink Benefits and some of those stories like Science Experiment and others, and I'm like, if they could have the opportunity to bring those to the big screen, in animation or not, as an adult film, rated R or PG-13 or hard PG-13, people would be invested. They'd want to see it just to see how, based on what they would hear about it, and maybe look at the original source material, they'd want to see it to just figure out and witness for themselves how trippy and how out there it can get. Joven16, another person I follow, they've got Nano Shift, they got, Secret Lives, Brianna's Secret Lives, they got Amanda and Nicole, and everything. These series that, again, just like I mentioned, if they had an opportunity to bring them to the big screen, live action or animated for an adult demographic with a R rating or a hard PG-13 rating, people would watch it just to see how trippy and out there it could be, especially if they hear about where they can find the source material and go from there. Even Laboratory in the Sandraverse, and all the other spin-offs, the Emily Sandra's series, they could take that, make it into a series, an animated series or an animated adult film with an R or hard PG-13, or maybe even a mid PG-13 and everything, a light R. Basically, the rating they could give it is like a mid PG-13 to light R. But point is, they could take that, put it on the big screen, and again, people would want to be invested in it, want to see it, based on maybe, hearing about based on the original source material, which they would go and check out just to get a clue of who the character and characters are. And then they'd want to go and see it just to see how trippy and far out it would get from a movie perspective. Because again, we are in that time frame. We are in a time frame where movies like Together, The Substance, and many others like them, and even examples of what could be if they chose to do it, we're in that time frame now where these kind of things are acceptable and would be given a chance to be given the big screen treatment. I mean, they say Hollywood's running out of ideas. Well, all Hollywood has to do is go to DeviantArt and Patreon, look up the people I just mentioned and others like them, and you have ideas that you can bring to the big screen right there. But yeah, in closing, am I surprised that people are reacting the way they are? Kind of, but not really. But it does get you, as someone that hasn't seen the movie, wanting to see it for yourself, to see exactly how far and trippy they go. Especially the ending. Because I remember reading about The Substance's ending, and this is a movie that starred Demi Moore, very well beloved actress. But it starred her, and essentially her ending fate was she turned into a blob of goo. And she melted on her star on the Walk of Fame. And then she got washed away. Literally, or mopped away. But point I'm getting at, point is, this is just something that, it doesn't really surprise me, but it does get me intrigued to want to see exactly, how far and trippy the movie goes, especially the ending scene. And I'm not alone in that. But anyway, though, guys, I just wanted to come on here and talk about it, give my thoughts on, why people are reacting the way they are, and also just talk about the fact that we are now in this era, this time frame, to where this kind of stuff will be more acceptable and more invested in and more interested and intrigued by, by the viewers, by the moviegoers, and I should say, just based on the premise and everything that's being presented to it, on paper and through trailers. But let me know what your thoughts are overall. Comment down below in the comment section below, as well in the live chat during the premiere if you haven't already. Also, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as also click on the link at the bottom of the description box to go to my Teespring store to find merchandise you can't get anywhere else. But guys, give me your thoughts overall on what I've had to say here. Again, I know I sound like I rambled, but do you agree we are now in a time frame and era to where these kind of trippy ass movies, body horror or not, psychedelic or not, are more acceptable than they would have been in the past? And do you think we have more to come in the future? Let me know, and until then, I'm out.